Morning. Okay, so the next chapter is throwing the hammer. The nice thing about Matilda was if you had met her casually and talked to her, you would have thought she was a perfectly normal 5-year-old. She displayed almost no outward sign of her brilliance, and she never showed off. This is very sensible, and she was a quiet little girl. You would say to yourself, and unless for some reason you had started a discussion with her about literature or mathematics, you would never know the extent of her brain power. It was therefore easy for Matilda to make friends with other children. All those in her class liked her. They knew, of course, that she was clever because they heard her being questioned by Miss Honey on the very first day of the term. And they knew also that she was allowed to sit quietly with a book during lessons and not pay attention to the teacher. But children of their age do not search deeply for reasons. They are far too wrapped up in their own small struggles to worry over much about the others and doings and why. Among Matilda's new found friends was a girl named Lavender. Right from the first day, the two of them started wandering around together during morning break and the lunch hour. Lavender was exceptionally small for her age, a skinny little nymph with deep brown eyes, with dark hair that was cut in a fringe across her forehead. Matilda liked her because she was gusty and adventurous. She liked Matilda for exactly the same reasons. Before the first week of the term was up, awesome tales about the headmistress, Miss Trunchbull, began to filter through the newcomers. Matilda and Lavender, standing in the corner of the playground during morning break on the third day, was approached by a rugged 10-year-old with a boil on her nose called Horatia. "New scum, I suppose," Horatia said to them, looking down from her great height. She was eating from an extra-large bag of potato chips and digging stuff out with handfuls. "Welcome to Borstal," she added, spraying bits of crisp out of her mouth like snowflakes. The two tiny ones, confronted by this giant, kept a watchful silence. "Have you met the Trunchbull yet?" Horatius asked. We've seen her at prayers," Lavender said, "but we haven't met her." "You've got a great treat coming to you," Horatia said. "She hates very small children. She therefore loathes the bottom class and everyone in it. She thinks 5-year-olds are grubs that haven't yet hatched out." In went another fistful of crisp, and when she spoke, out sprayed the crumbs. "If you survive your first year, you may just manage to live through the rest of your time here. But many don't survive. They get carried out on stretchers, screaming. I've seen it often." Horatia paused to observe the effect the remarks were having on the two titchy ones. Not very much. They seemed pretty cool. So the large one decided to regale them with further information. "I suppose you know the Trunchbull has a lock-up cupboard in her private quarters called the Chokey. Have you heard about this? The Chokey?" Matilda and Lavender shook their heads and continued to gaze up at the giant, being very careful. They were inclined to mistrust any creature that was larger than they were, especially senior girls. "The Chokey," Horatio went on, "is a very tall but very narrow cupboard. The floor is only 10 inches square, so you can't sit down or squat in it. You have to stand, and 3 of the walls are made of cement with bits of broken glass sticking all over it, and you can't lean against them. You have to stand more or less attention at the whole time when you get locked up. It's terrible." "Can you lean against the door?" Matilda asked. "Don't be daft," Horatio said. "The door's got thousands of sharp spiky nails sticking out of it. They've been hammered through from the outside, probably by the Trunchbull herself." "Have you ever been in there?" Lavender asked. "My first term I was in there 6 times, Horatio said. "Twice for a whole day, and the other times for 2 hours each. But 2 hours is quite bad enough. It's pitch dark, and you have to stand up, dead straight, and if you wobble, you'll get spiked either by the glass on the walls or the nails on the door." "Why were you put in?" Matilda asked. "What had you done?" "The first time," Horatius said, "I poured out half a tin of golden syrup out on the seat of the chair that Trunchbull was going to sit on at prayers. It was wonderful." When she lowered herself in the chair, there was a loud, squelchy sound similar to that made by a hippopotamus when lowering its foot into the mud on the banks of the river. But you're too small and stupid to have read that just-so stories, aren't you? I've read them, Matilda said. You're a liar, Horatia said. You can't even read yet, but no matter. So when the Trunchbull sat down on the golden syrup, the squelch was beautiful, and when she jumped up again, the chair sort of stuck to the seat of those awful green breeches she wears and came up with her for a few seconds until the thick syrup slowly came unstuck. Then she clasped her hands to the seat of her breeches, and both hands got covered in the muck. You should have heard her bellow. But how does she know it was you? Lavender asked. A little squirt called Ollie Bogwhistle snitched on me, Horatius said. I knocked his front teeth out. And the Trunchbull put you in the chokey for a whole day? Matilda asked, gulping. All day long, Horatius said. I was off my rocker when she let me out. I was babbling like an idiot. Were there other things to put you into the chokey? Lavender asked. Oh, I can't remember them all, Horatius said. She spoke with the air of an old warrior who had been to so many battles of bravery that had it become a commonplace. It's all so long ago, she added, stuffing more crisps into her mouth. Oh, yes, I can remember one. Here's what happened. I chose a time when I knew the Trunchbull was out of the way, teaching the sixth formers, and I put on my hand and asked to go to the bogs. But instead of going there, I sneaked into the Trunchbull's room, and after a speedy search, I found the drawer where she kept all her gym knickers. Now remember, girls, gym knickers, they're kind of like the underpants. Go on, Matilda said. What happened next? I had sent away by post, you see, for this very powerful itching powder, Horatia said. It was 50p a packet and was called the Skin Scorcher. The label said it was made from the powdered teeth of deadly snakes, and it was guaranteed to raise welts the size of walnuts on your skin. So I sprinkled this stuff inside her pair of her knickers in the drawer, and then folded them up carefully. Horatius paused to cram more crisp into her mouth. Did it work? Lavender asked. Well, Horatius said, a few days later, during prayer, the Trunchbull suddenly started scratching herself like mad down there. I said to myself, here we go. She changed for Jim already. It was pretty wonderful to be sitting there watching it all, and knowing that I was the only person in the whole school who realized exactly what was going inside the Trunchbull's pants. And I felt safe, too. I knew I couldn't be caught. Then the scratching got worse. She couldn't stop. She must have thought she had a wasp's nest down there. And then, right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, she leapt up, grabbed her bottoms, and rushed out of the room. Both Matilda and Lavender were enthralled. It was quite clear to think that they were, at this moment, standing in the presence of a master. Here was somebody who had brought the art of scoldering to the highest point of perfection. Somebody, moreover, who was willing to risk life and limb in pursuit of her calling. They gazed in wonder at the goddess. Then suddenly, even the boil on her nose was no longer a blemish, but a badge of courage. But how did she catch you that time? Lavender asked, breathless with wonder. She didn't, Horatius said, but I got a day in the chokey just the same. Why? They both asked. The Trunchbull, Horatius said, has a nasty habit of guessing. When she doesn't know who the culprit is, she makes a guess at it, and the trouble is she's often right. I was the prime suspect the time because of the golden syrup job, and although I knew she didn't have any proof of nothing, I said, anything I said didn't make a difference. I kept shouting, how could have I done it, Miss Trunchbull? I didn't even know that you kept to spare knickers at school. I don't even know what itching powder is. I've never heard of it, but the lion didn't help me in spite of the great performance I put on. The Trunchbull simply, she grabbed me by the ear, rushed me to the chokey, and then the double, and she threw me inside the locked door. That was the second all-day stretch. It was absolute torture. I was spiked and cut all over. when I came out. It's like war, Matilda said. You're darn right it's like war, said Horatius, crying. The casualties are terrific. We are the Crusaders, the gallant army, fighting for the lives, with any weapons at all. Trunchbull is the Prince of Darkness, the foul serpent, the fiery dragon, with all the weapons at her command. It's a tough life. We all try to support each other. You could rely on us, Lavender said, making her height of 3 feet 2 inches stretch as tall as possible. No, I can't, Horatius said. You're only shrimps. But you never know. We may find a use for you one day in some undercover job. Tell us just a little bit more about what she does, Matilda said. Please do. I mustn't frighten you before you have been here only for a week, Horatius said. You won't, Lavender said. We may be small, but we're quite tough. Listen to this, then, Horatius said. Only yesterday, the Trunchbull caught a boy called Julius Rotwinkle eating licorice all sorts during the scripture lesson, and she simply picked him up by one arm, flung him clear out of the open classroom window. Our classroom is 1 floor up, and we saw Julius Rotwinkle go sailing over the garden like a frisbee, landing with a thump in the middle of the lettuces. Then the Trunchbull turned to us and said, From now on, anybody caught eating in class goes straight out the window. Did this Julius Rotwinkle break any bones? Lavender asked. Oopsies. Only a few, Horatius said. You've got to remember that the Trunchbull once threw the hammer for Britain in the Olympics, so she's very proud of her right arm. What's throwing the hammer? Lavender asked. The hammer, Horatius said, is actually a ruddy great cannonball on the end of a long bit of wire, and the thrower whisks it around and around his head faster and faster, and then lets it go. You have to be terrifically strong. The Trunchbull will throw anything around just to keep her arm in, especially children. Good heavens, Lavender said. I once heard her say, Horatius went on, that a large boy is about the same height as an Olympic hammer, and therefore he's very useful for practicing with. At that point, something strange happened. The playground, which then had been filled with shrieks and shouting of children at play, all at once became silent as the grave. Watch out, Horatius whispered. Matilda and Lavender glanced around and saw the gigantic figure of Miss Trunchbull advancing through the crowd of boys and girls. With menacing strides, the children drew back hastily to let her through, and her progress across the asphalt was like that of Moses going through the Red Sea when the waters parted. A formidable figure. She was 2, her belted smock, her green breeches. Below her knees, her calves' muscles stood like grapefruits inside her stockings. Amanda Thurp! She was shouting. You, Amanda Thurp, come here. Hold your hats, Horatius whispered. What's going to happen? Lavender whispered back. That idiot, Amanda, Horatius said, has her long hair. It grew very long during the holes, and her mother has plaited it back with pigtails. Silly thing to do. Why silly? Matilda asked. If there's one thing the Trunchbull can't stand, it's pigtails, Horatius said. Matilda and Lavender saw the giant in green breeches advancing upon a girl of 10 who had a pair of plaited gold pigtails hanging over her shoulders. Each pigtail had a blue satin bow at the end of it, and it looked very pretty. The girl wearing the pigtails, Amanda Thurp, stood quite still, watching the gigantic giant, and the expression of her face was one that you might find out on the face of a person who is trapped in a small field with an enraged bull which is charging flat out towards her. The girl was glued in the spot, terror-struck, her eyes popped, quivering, knowing for certain that the day of judgment had come for her at last. Miss Trunchbull now reached the victim, stood towering over her. I want those filthy pigtails off you before you come back to school tomorrow, she barked. Chop 'em off! Throw 'em in the dustbin! You understand? Amanda, paralyzed with fright, managed to stutter. My mommy likes them. She plaited them for me every morning. Your mummy's a twit, the Trunchbull bellowed. She pointed her finger the size of a salami at the child's head and shouted, "You look like a rat with the tail coming out of its head." Oh, that's a major put down. That's mean. Miss Trunchbull is a meanie. She's a bully. Okay, let's see what happens to Amanda. My mummy thinks I look lovely, Miss Trunchbull. Amanda stuttered, shaking like a little balance beam. I don't give a tinker's toot what your mommy thinks, the Trunchbull yelled, and with that she lunged forward, grabbed hold of Amanda's pigtails in her fist, lifted the girl off the ground, then she started swinging her around and around, her head faster and faster. Amanda was screaming, "Bloody murder!" Miss Trunchbull was yelling, "I'll give your pigtails to you, you little rat!" Shades of the Olympics, Horatius muttered. She's getting up speed now, just like she does with the hammer. 10-1, she's going to throw her. And now the Trunchbull was leaning back against the weight of the whirling girl and pivoted out, pointing out her toes, spinning round and round, and soon Amanda Thurp was traveling so fast she became a blur. Suddenly, with a mighty grunt, the Trunchbull let go of the pigtails. Amanda went sailing like a rocket, right over the wire fence of the playground, high up in the sky. Well thrown, sir, somebody shouted from across the playground, and Matilda, who was mesmerized by the whole crazy affair, saw Amanda Thurp descending in a long, graceful parabola to the playing field beyond. She landed on the grass, bounced 3 times, finally came to rest. Then she sat up. She looked a little trifle. She was dazed. Who could blame her? But for a minute or so she was on her feet again, tottering back towards the playground. The Trunchbull stood in the playground, dusting off her hands. "Not bad," she said, "considering I'm not in strict training. Not bad at all." Then she strode off. "She's mad," Horatius said. "But don't the parents complain?" Matilda asked. "Would yours?" "I know mine wouldn't. She treats the mothers and fathers just the same as the children, and they're all scared of death to her. I'll be seeing you sometime, you two." And with that, she walked away. Okay, kids, that was the last of that one. Join me next week for the next chapter, okay? Bye.